Of Toledo, we are surrounded by experts. And we tap into those experts here on Rocket Talk.
Welcome to Rocket Talk. Today's discussion, dating in the digital age. Now, we have the professor who's teaching a brand new class on the topic. She's also researching how social media impacts people trying to move on from broken relationships. Plus, a professor who teaches courses on ethics and media in regard to gender, sexuality, and relationships. But first, here's what our students had to say about their preferences for meeting potential partners, and this may surprise you. College cafeterias across the country could be a bit quieter these days because so much communication happens here. Even our lunch order is online.
It's just kind of like a evolution of technology and stuff.
So freshman year, Jeff Howells tried Tinder.
But it never went anywhere for me.
That also didn't work for Lauren Curis.
Had some good conversations and met one person, but it didn't go very far.
Her friend Katie Shalo
That's usually how it goes.
shares a similar story.
I haven't had anything that lasted or worked, in the long term from apps.
Across the room, Jordan Phoenix's hopes for love don't hinge on any app.
It's just meeting people, talking to them, and then maybe you might see them in person, maybe not.
But I wanted to know what students would say when the camera wasn't rolling, so I created this anonymous survey and distributed it across the classroom. The results were similar. Most people wanted to find love in person, but occasionally felt forced to turn to tech. Back in the student union, Howells is happy to be off those apps and says he found his love the old-fashioned way.
She actually is on the team here. We both run cross country, so yeah, we just started out as friends and met on the cross country team, and it just kind of evolved over time.
But no matter how you tend to look for love, Hal says patience is key.
I don't think there's necessarily a right way to meet someone. I think it happens on its own time, and when it's meant to be, it's meant to be.
Take that from someone who found who he was looking for.
She's like my best friend, so it just works out well.
Let's take a closer look at some of the data. You heard in that piece a lot of students said that they felt forced to use the apps. That's actually coming from that 85% of students who said they prefer to meet people in person, but they felt like they had to turn to the apps. Well, we asked why. They said that's because sometimes they're looking for something a little quick, something casual. They'll turn to the apps for that. A lot of people said, frankly, they're a little shy, introverted, and it's easier to strike up a conversation on an app. Many people also mentioned they wanted to expand the dating pool. So we asked about in-person dating, why students preferred that. Safety was mentioned over and over again. A lot of people said they wanted to meet in a public place, a place where they could leave quickly if they needed to. They also mentioned more authentic conversation happens in person. They said they wanted to watch how their date interacted with others. How did he treat the waitress or the person at the ticket counter? Because that's a really big deal. And they're also afraid of being catfished online. We asked them what they would change about online dating. They said people should be less superficial, and they wish there was a way to make the apps safer, but no one could come up with any suggestions on how to do that. And they said that dating apps absolutely, and online social media, that makes it harder for them to move on because they are tempted to type in their ex's name and see what they're doing without them. And then sometimes the algorithms they mentioned will just pop that up whether they're looking for that or not. And you may be wondering, well, what about adults? Because, these are younger adults, we should say college students. According to the Pew Research Center, 30% of Americans say they have used an app or website for dating. 12% say they've married or seriously dated someone they met online. And of course, this varies by age. The older you go up in population, the less likely they are to use one of these apps. And it's important to note that members of the LGBTQ community, they more often use these apps, and some of our respondents said they did that just to expand the dating pool to find more like-minded people. So allow me to officially introduce our panelists. Dr. Jeanne Kusina is the Interim Director of UT Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. She's also a distinguished university lecturer in the Department of Women and Gender Studies, where she teaches courses on ethics and media in regard to gender, sexuality, and relationships. And Dr. Tasha Dunn is an associate professor here in the Department of Communication. Her research largely addresses the relationship between media and our lived experiences, and she is currently teaching a special topics course called Dating in the Digital Age, which is why I asked her to be here today. So, Dr. Dunn, I want to start with you. You mentioned this paradox of choice, and I want to just ask, are these apps making us miserable?
Yeah, so I think it's yes and no. Part of, I think, what adds to some of the misery is this paradox of choice. So people often think that the more choices that you have to choose from, the better, right? Like, it's good to have an expanded dating pool, to have more people to choose from. But actually, in 2004, psychologist Barry Schwartz published a book that actually talks about how more choices can actually make us more miserable because we have a harder time sorting through those options. And then say you choose someone, you end up kind of second guessing that choice because you could always hop back into the dating pool and maybe find somebody a little bit better. So more choice isn't always more effective.
Dr. Kusina, all these choices online, is this making us more superficial?
Well, superficiality in dating is not new. So each generation does have to deal with that, but it certainly amplifies it, especially being a visual medium largely, and the sort of pressure upon people to sort of feel they need to market themselves online. And because of seeing those things like their exes or friends, the need to keep up with them can be a concern.
And Dr. Kusina, you mentioned marketing yourself online. A lot of young and older people go to great lengths to market themselves online, maybe posting photos or doing things that they will later regret. What advice do you give to parents who may have children on these apps?
Well, certainly it's going to vary by age as well, and the younger, the more you need to pay attention. But I would recommend treating the digital dating world the same as you would the actual physical world. And supervising them, but also having conversations with them about their expectations and who they are talking with, and the ways in which they go about seeking what they want in a relationship, and not necessarily drawing a harsh line distinction between the two.
Dr. Dunn, what do you say to that? Advice to parents?
Yeah, I mean, I would say first to embrace this new reality. I think dating in the digital age is here to stay. I'm teaching the course now, but I've taught it 2 other times before, and I mean, people sign up for it. It's a popular course because this is not going away. It's actually the most popular way that U.S. couples connect, and globally, it's increased in popularity, especially since COVID-19, when people were looking for ways to connect. And I would say second, just be safe. There are a lot of useful tips out there. RAINN, or RAIN, it's more commonly called, has several tips for both if you meet online, when you connect online, and also when you meet in person. So tips like video chat, for example, before you meet to see them. You can also tell a friend where you're going. Don't rely on the date for transportation. That's a really big one. But there are several other useful tips that I would recommend that parents and users of the apps view and deeply consider before using them.
And Dr. Dunn, we've talked a lot about younger adults, but there may be older adults who are re-entering that dating arena. They're not used to these apps.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for them?
So I think I would again say embrace the new reality. I think it can be fruitful. I think that there are so many apps and platforms that they can speak to anybody's interests. If you're a cat lover, there's tabby.com, for example, farmersonly.com, right, which speaks for itself. So I think these apps can cater to niche interests, which I think can be a good thing. And the second big thing, a lot of research says cut to the chase. There tends to be a lot of messaging back and forth, and people get overwhelmed. It's like this back and forth, constant exchange of information. Cut to the chase. Figure out, as long as you keep those safety measures in mind, once you meet that person face to face, you can kind of determine whether or not you want to move forward. And you're eliminating that back and forth that I think can waste a lot of time and cause people to really feel overwhelmed.
Dr. Kusina, how have these apps changed marriage and relationships? Once you're in that relationship, what impact do they have?
Well, ostensibly, again, it is sort of just, the high-tech version of what we have known before. I think the main thing is that a lot of people begin, particularly if they're younger, looking just for dates. And then as they get a little older and have a little bit more experience, then they start looking for more of a long-term life partner. And with that, I think that is sort of one of the both parts of optimism as well as disappointment. Because I think everyone, in a way, approaches it the way we approach a slot machine, perhaps, knowing that most of the time it's probably not going to pay off, but that they are looking still for that long-lasting relationship.
Dr. Dunn, I understand apps, they've changed the way we break up and move on from relationships as well.
Yeah. So this is kind of a lot of what my current research looks at is, I think breakups now, they're not just material, they're digital. So we have to think about things like, how do you split shared possessions, right? Pictures, digital pictures, videos, music, things like that. Also, how do you represent your new single identity online? Breakups have just become a lot more public, and I think that it's harder for people to move on. And you mentioned the students had mentioned monitoring before, monitoring their exes. Over 90% of people do this. So I think breakups just become a lot more complicated because of this digital component.
So Dr. Dunn, I'm going to give you the last word, about 30 seconds left.
Sure.
I know you asked your students what they would change about the apps.
Yeah.
What did they say?
So first, make them less of a game. A lot of the apps think that the more matches, the better. It's like a conquest. They call the swipe apps a version of relation shopping. People are not commodities, right? So I think try to make the apps less of a game, and also increase safety features, which was also mentioned in the survey that you found. So increase safety measures and less of a reliance on superficial features like height and age and income and education, but more trying to look at different traits like personality, loyalty, kindness. Is there a way for apps to make a space for that?
Wow. I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for watching. That's all the time we have. We will see you next time on Rocket Talk.